You're about to listen to an episode of the Leadership Melting Pot podcast, brought to you by Lumerous. Engage with us as we dissect an aspect of leadership and see how you may apply some of what is shared across your business. Welcome to the Leadership Melting Pot, another episode. My name is Romeo Fs, and I am your host. Today, my co-host Deborah will be joining us momentarily, just having a few technical glitches. But today, I have the great pleasure of having as our guest and co-host, technically, because usually when we have our guests, we call them co-host anyway, because it's a conversation we're having. We have none other than Aidan Driscoll. Aidan is, he'll get a chance to tell you a little bit about himself. Today, we'll be discussing and dissecting the whole matter of paternal leave in the workplace, which is pretty revolutionary, something that has come about in the modern age, I would say maybe in the last couple of years. And Aidan is someone who has been dedicating himself to work with workplaces around the importance of paternal leave, and also working with new fathers around the subject of paternal leave. So, Aidan, why don't we start off by you just telling me a little bit about the business you run called Revolution U, and a little bit about yourself and why you got involved, why this has now become your passion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Revolution U because out of necessity, really. Mm-hmm. I've got two young children, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And my youngest was born during the pandemic, week 1 of COVID. So as you can imagine, the world was turned upside down.
Yes.
And on a personal level, my own world as a dad, and probably just as a man, really was turned upside down. Very shortly after having Max, I started to suffer with depression, and I really started to struggle with the concept of being a father.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have anywhere to turn. I had paternity leave. I was lucky enough to have 2 weeks paid paternity leave. But as you can imagine, going straight back into work after suffering quite a serious breakdown at the time.
Right.
I literally had nowhere to turn, nobody to talk to. It was difficult to go and see your GP. And in all honesty, I'm a man. I'm less likely to go and see or seek support.
Yeah.
So when I hit rock bottom, after a conversation with my partner, and as you can imagine, that wasn't an easy conversation for us to have. I started to really try to understand what was wrong, challenges that I was personally facing. But more importantly, it was clear to me that if I was able to get back on track and start to feel confident again, and certainly in my role as a father, that I needed to give something back. I couldn't find anything. So Revolution U was born out of necessity. And it's there to help new dads, current dads, experienced dads, really just reflect on the power of fatherhood and the importance of the role, but also to help dads build confidence in that role. Because right now we don't have that level of support or community.
So a few things jumped out at me when you were speaking and introducing yourself, and I just made a note of them, and I'll jump back to them. But just to kind of frame the conversation, help our audience understand what is paternal leave, what does it entail, and why it's important.
Yeah. So if we call it paternity leave, in the UK we've got the opportunity from a statutory perspective to take some time off. We get 1 or 2 weeks as dads. And that is our opportunity to bond with our children, from a statutory perspective, we're talking £156 per week. So immediately we're on the back foot. There are challenges that we have to face financially as new parents, mums and dads, with the mum, taking time off. The dad is faced with a difficult decision of.
So hold on one second. So you're saying that for paternal leave, when you take those 2 weeks off, your employer you don't get your regular pay. You
don't get your regular pay unless you qualify for an enhanced package, and that will depend on your employer. So statutory pay is £156 a week. So in my position, in my current role, with my current employer, I had to qualify for statutory pay. So to qualify for statutory pay, I have to do 15 weeks before baby is born. I need to have been in continuous employment for 26 weeks with that employer. Then I can get my statutory. If I'm lucky enough to have an employer that then tops me up, I can have an enhanced statutory pay package. An enhanced paternity package. So in my circumstances, as an employee of the company I work for, having worked there for 2.5 years before my second son was born, I was entitled to an enhanced package.
Right.
That isn't standard across all businesses. And it ultimately depends on whether or not you are an employee of a company. So if you're self-employed, you're not getting any statutory paternity pay. You have to have been in continuous employment for the 26 weeks, 15 weeks before baby is born. So we're talking 26 plus 15, not 26.
Right.
And you have to give the correct notice. So if I chose not to give notice within the defined period of time, then my employer might choose not to allow me to have statutory pay or even my enhanced package. So there are many people out there that are getting statutory paternity pay, but they're not getting an enhanced uplifted package.
All right. So when you say enhanced, enhanced means that your employer just continues with your regular monthly salary.
Yeah. In my circumstances, I had my regular salary. It's not always, it could be up to 90%. So it will depend on, and this is the important thing that new dads or future dads really have to think about is, what does my employment contract say? And what benefits are available to me as a dad? Because if I don't know what is available to me, you're not fully in the know when you're making those early decisions.
Right.
Or can I take a week off? Can I take 2 weeks off? Or am I going to sacrifice, on a 20, I think it's, if we're talking £25,000 a year as an average salary, we're talking an £1,800 drop in take-home salary, for a 2 week, for the 2 week period.
Good. Debs, we were just having a quick conversation about, Aidan telling us about his business, Revolution U, sorry. And then we started talking about what is paternal leave or paternity leave. And he was just explaining to me the legalities around that. And Aidan was kind of saying something that I didn't know, that the fact that when you get paternity leave, well, 2 weeks. So is it 2 weeks that you're entitled to, or as a maximum? Is that it?
Yeah, from for statutory, you get 1 to 2 weeks paternity leave.
Okay, that's not enough for you to really create any kind of bond.
It's absolutely not enough.
2 weeks,
and I think if you consider, my partner and I had very routine births both times.
Yeah.
But if you imagine, the difficulties that many people do go through in those first 2 weeks, they're actually losing the quality time of their paternity leave, or even their maternity leave from a mother's perspective, because they might be in the hospital, or the wife or partner might be recovering from birth, and therefore actually the paternity leave isn't as focused on baby. It's more focused on the recovery and the adjustment to fatherhood and motherhood.
And I can also imagine the fact that if there's another child in the mix as well, right? That you also have to be helping with the care of that child as well, right? I
Yeah.
mean, let me bring Debs in here, because Debs is also a mother, and you know, and has gone through this with her husband, I guess. Like, Deb, what was your experience as a mother with, I mean, in your time, did your
In
husband take paternity leave? Because
Thank you, Vivian.
I didn't, no, the reason I say that is because I didn't take any paternity leave. I didn't even know that
Yeah.
existed.
No. Well, it wasn't. So just to put into context, obviously, as one of your expert panel here, I now have a son who's off to university in a couple of weeks. And then another teenager. So it was a long time ago. But there wasn't paternity leave at that time. My husband did take a break and spend time with me, and I was very lucky to have that. And I think if he was around to ours, he would say it was a wonderful time. It built a real bond for him with both sons,
Yeah.
And he tried very hard through his working career to make time for the children. And I think of old it was not seen to be the father's part to be a real part of children's upbringing. It was the mother's role. I think that is changing, and I think we need to look at how we split parental care, whether it's mother or father, because I think both add such value to a child's upbringing, and I think we're recognizing that more and more these days.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was pretty lucky, the fact that when my kids came around, I was running my own business, so I had the flexibility that I could just take time off whenever needed. And the other beautiful thing of that was that the office was on the same compound as where we lived. So it was just a stroll across the lawn from the house to, because I was running a trucking business at the time, to where the business was. So it was much easier, and I was very, very involved in their lives. But Debs, I know you are also very, very involved in the whole notion of recruitment and working with HR leads around stuff in these areas. And Aidan, you could probably jump in here. Like, what are some of the things that you think companies, both of you, I mean, or all of us, companies could do to better support fathers around paternity leave? Because just thinking about it, 2 weeks is just ridiculous.
I think access, knowledge, understanding, education around the importance of paternity leave being one, but also offering enhanced packages of paternity leave. Now, depending on the business size, obviously that was probably going to be quite difficult for a number of companies, but there are organizations out there offering significantly better packages than even the package that I received, which is 2 weeks at full pay. So, but it's kind of signposting it from day one in the business. Now, when you apply for a role, and having had 2 children and moved jobs within those timeframes, I never even looked at paternity leave as a benefit. I didn't even comprehend it being an important factor in my decision to join an organization, whereas now it is. But those are the things, and it's that when the dad is, when you give notice to your employer, I had okay, that's great. So when are you not going to be here? That was it. And then when I got back, and certainly on the second time around, in that 2 weeks, I'd had a pretty serious mental breakdown, and we hit COVID. And on day one, I was presented with, we need you to mitigate this inflation and the costs associated with your daily job. We'll ask you about how the last 2 weeks were when you get that project sorted.
Interesting point, Aidan. I think you've raised some very relevant points in terms of that accessibility to it. And I think from my experience, and I think on the back of the pandemic as well, that things are changing a bit. There's a long way to go. But I think flexible working, for example, hybrid working, are helping in this piece, substantially. And I think we are, with kind of the war on talent, if you like, to find talent and retain talent, companies are looking to be more flexible. So sharing parental leave, for example, so rather than just being 2 weeks for the sort of one parent, it can be flipped between the two of you, and I think that's that's an advantage, especially around adoption, especially around around surrogates, etc. So it is changing, but there's a lot further to go. And I think we're a society that traditionally has been very sort of machismo, I would say, that for a man to take time out and be with his family was not seen as, as the thing to do, that you have to be at your desk, jacket on the back, there all hours, and it would be, the female that would take the lead. And I do feel that we're evolving. We may not be all the way there yet, but we are on a journey. And I say one of kind of the silver linings, if you like, of the terrible cloud of COVID has been this kind of hybrid situation where now, fathers could be working from home and therefore drop their children, at school, or be there for a sort of school a game, and then they go back to work afterwards. So I do think we are improving, but I agree with Aidan, we've still got a bit of a way to go on this.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to note that this is a kind of a first world kind of experience, because, for example, so my experience of bringing up my kids were in Jamaica, right? And so in Jamaica, you don't have paternity leave because it's not seen as that, as Deb said earlier, it's going back to the old kind of way that the mother is the most important entity in a child's life, especially in the early stages. And you find men who are how do I put it? Men who they fear the whole notion of saying, I'm going to go home and help my wife with the kids, right? I mean, it's changing now. The younger generation are changing, but also, when I travel to Middle Eastern countries and to African countries as well, that is a long way away in terms of men, wanting to get involved in the early stages of their children's life, and it's just seen pretty much as a kind of a female's role. But the other thing that comes to mind, Deb mentioned the whole notion of hybrid working, which is really key. I'm just thinking about if I was supposed to have a child right now, like the mental strain, I think that would put on me as a new father, especially when maybe you don't have a lot of support mechanism to kind of help you where that is concerned. That must be, because like for me, I had my mother and my grandmother and housekeepers and all that kind of stuff. Like nowadays those things aren't, as you have young children whose parents are still young and they are working as well. So how are you seeing that, Aidan, among the work that you do with young fathers?
I think a lot of the dads are seeing that everyone tells you fatherhood is difficult and parenthood is hard. And I had this conversation with a dad the other day, and that's all they tell you is it's hard. And then when you turn around and say to somebody a couple of months in, and you go, this is hard. I'm really struggling here. And from a male perspective, that's quite a difficult thing to even own up to. When you turn around to them and they're kind of like, yeah, but it'll get better. Okay, but when? Please tell me when, because I'm really struggling right now.
Aidan, hold on a minute. If we are saying that as men, that it's hard, can you imagine what the women are saying?
Yeah. I totally agree. I'm with you.
With them,
And I think that's the, a lot of the challenges that new dads are facing and dads generally are facing is that if we're in a position of struggle, there isn't anywhere to turn. Whereas in the motherhood space, there's a lot more community. Yeah. There's a lot more. So I spent the last year looking after my youngest every Thursday. So we go to soft play and various different activities. But I went on my own because there wasn't any other dads to go with. So it was very much it's an isolating part of life. Whereas as mums, there's community, and there's also almost like a kinship. They're almost connected in terms of the experiences that they're going through. Whereas a father can be seen as a bit of an island, and coming home or spending time with the kids, all of those things create little layers of pressure where of course he just ignores it and moves on because that's his responsibility. But there's certainly space and opportunity for more focus on dad. Absolutely, the mother is the most important part of the family unit at that early stage, but a dad without support will go quiet. He will turn to things that aren't positive. He will continue to push on and push. And I'm talking from experience. I'll continue to push on and push on and push on. And then eventually it catches up with you. But because you've not opened up and spoken about it or had somebody to say, how are you? How are you feeling? What are you struggling with? Many dads that I've spoken to, they've gone too far. And therefore their relationship is beginning to deteriorate. And ultimately that impacts their relationship with their kids. And that's actually been made harder in some instances by hybrid working and COVID generally. My kids are on the other side of the door all day. Mm-hmm. One of them's at school, but during COVID, I was at work every day. They were in and out, and it's good to see them. But when you're on conference calls all day, it's constantly just mute. Can I move and just? I can't give you the Lego, It's that. And you used to get that little delay of walking in, driving home, or getting a train home. Certainly in my example, and I'd be able to open the door and I'd have kind of de-stressed. Whereas in the hybrid working environment, the door is open and you're in, and it's full on 100 miles an hour again.
No, I agree, and I think that the system as it stands is very much set up for the female lead, if you like, for the child carrying parent. So there's a lot of support, both pre and postnatal, for mothers, where you can go and be with others, and you can download and you can share experience, and they try this, try that, try the other. And I don't think there's the same support network for men, and whether that's via groups you set up online or groups within offices, I think there's space for that. And I think we had a very interesting podcast at Romeo a few weeks ago where we were talking about the women growing and taking some of the traditional male roles away, or this parity, but then where does that leave the male in terms of taking on some more traditionally female roles? Unless you accept that it's not a weaker sex, it's just different, we're all human, then we can't make progress. And I think you're right about, I have a friend who's a very successful businesswoman, and her husband is the carer, done a great job with the kids, but he's one of a few. It will grow over time, I think. But you're right. I'm obviously, it's not my experience, but I'm sure it must be quite alienating when you don't feel, who can I go and talk to and just download and share this frustrating experience, exhausting experience, happy experience. Where is my network to support that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Aidan, so you mentioned the whole notion of what was your experience like, as a new dad, if you don't mind sharing. What were some of the lived experiences that you can share, so other dads can kind of see the signs, pretty much.
So the first one was brilliant. Everything went smoothly when baby arrived. Everything after that, I had my 2 weeks paternity. We were settling in. We were able to see family, friends. But I only know this now. What I hadn't quite figured out before I'd become a father was what direction was I traveling in, and what things was I going to contribute in that year off that my wife was having. So my wife's a commercial property lawyer, so she was going back to work, and that was always going to be the plan. But in that first year, you've got, she's she was in control. She had a good support network. I had a half decent support network at that time. But what I was doing was throwing myself into work. I was working later, traveling, going up between different offices, spending time away. All of those things were building, I suppose, pressure that I hadn't experienced. And actually, I felt a lot of guilt for being away and not being able to support mum and baby. And then I decided, we were a couple of months in, I decided to change jobs. And one of the things that I kind of talked to dads about is you've got to get your decision making right. You've got to think it through. I made a decision because the job was 10 minutes from my house. It wasn't the job I wanted, but it was a 10-minute commute, which meant I spent way more time at home. And actually it turned into an unmitigated disaster. And I took a job for the first time ever for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Because my decision making was very much, I want to be a dad. I want to focus on providing a bit more. That was definitely a pinch point for me. But I wanted to be around. I didn't want to be like a distant dad that was constantly coming in and out of missing bath time, bedtime, all the really nice, unique thing. And you do them a lot, but each one is unique, especially when they're little. And then when the second one came along, and after I'd gone through that traumatic experience of taking a job I didn't want, then losing that job, my coping mechanism was just to just carry on, ignore it, I'll be fine. I got another job and the pattern started again. So I just worked harder and harder and longer. And then you start to take less care of yourself. So no exercise, coffee, living on caffeine, things like, not eating good food because we were eating late. Baby number 2 arrives. And what should have been an amazing experience wasn't. It was possibly the worst 2 weeks of my adult life because I couldn't think, I couldn't see, I couldn't feel positive. And all of those things, I couldn't put a finger on what was wrong with me at the time. And because we were in COVID, I didn't really have anybody to talk to. And we were adapting to COVID like week 1. So we were really just, okay, well, we could team somebody or, FaceTime, but you're not going to tell somebody that you're suffering in a way over FaceTime, not knowing that you're not going to be able to see them for a long time because it puts pressure on other people. So in a nutshell, the firstborn was an amazing experience. The second one, I felt like I was struggling to catch my breath because I hadn't learned how to improve things in between having 1 and 2. I kind of just kept, this is how I'm programmed. This is how I respond to stress and pressure and anxiety or whatever. This is how I'll continue my life. And it's just a cycle of things. When the second one arrived and that really just took over, I needed to strip back and understand what the pressure was, what was important to me. And I think a lot of new dads think that providing is the most important thing that they do, when in reality, being a good listener, being a good communicator, being open to the pressures that your partner's facing, but also being a little bit honest and going, not so sure about this in terms of struggling with this element of it. You know that the pressure is going to increase and intensify because we're sleep deprived most of the time. But as a dad, you're sleep deprived and going into work. And therefore, as a commuter, if you're on the train, you can probably get a bit of shut eye. But I was commuting in a car for almost 3 hours a day. So I was always awake. And therefore, it's subtle things. And the most important thing that I tell dads, I also tell mums, because my wife didn't know there was anything wrong with me. It wasn't her fault. It's just, I was very good, like many men are, at hiding it.
Wouldn't you say that's like the toxic masculinity? that we have been taught as men, as boys growing up, that there's just certain things that we should hide. We should just, as they would say, man up. We should just man up.
Literal expression.
I mean, Deb, you have 2 boys. I mean, like, how do you manage this with them as a mother, and knowing that this can be damaging to them as husbands and fathers growing up? I mean, I'm sorry to be putting you on the spot, but
no, not and it's fair one. And you know that there is that tradition, you know, literally that expression, man up. You know, boys don't cry. I think that has changed. You know,
okay,
over time. And I say I was very lucky to have my late husband around a lot, you know, with the children. So I think there's more of a balance there. But I think it is. It's about that. It's about their upbringing. It's about their education. It's about talking. It's about allowing them. It's about saying, you know, of course you can cry. Of course you can express your emotions. It's really important that you express your emotions. And it's just moving on from the kind of education that I don't want to come to other countries. This is, you know, particularly talking about the UK here.
Yeah.
But yeah, very much, you know, moving on in terms of the stereotypes that we have of how, you know, females behave and how males behave, or, you know, or other parts of the community. We do stereotype, and it's important that we move away from that and allow everyone to, you know, to express themselves in whichever way that they wish to, as far as possible. But it's a journey. But I do think that both at school now and in sort of, you know, other sort of situations, we are freeing up. And I'm sure Aidan is very good with, you know, with his children, and my children are steeped in, you know, diversity and inclusion and that kind of importance of speaking up and talking through. But having said that, and you know, this is showing something a little bit more personal. But you know, as you know, I lost my husband a little while ago, and one son is very closed about it and doesn't want to talk about it, and the other son is much more open. So there's a little bit of personality in there as well. But we, you know, and we do encourage them to speak out. But there's a little bit of, maybe that's just how they are too, you know, in that, I think.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's especially in the Black community, like, you know, in the Jamaican community as well. It is so rigid about how you should behave as a male, like very archaic in the way how it's done. You know, that, you know, you should be, you know, a man is the person that brings the weight on his shoulder and never flinches and never shows any kind of shift, right? You know, you don't even talk to your wife about certain things, right? You know, that's happening. And I have a son. My son is 20 now, and you know, my son would still come and sit next to me in the sofa and put his head on my shoulder, you know, and we would still share a hug and that kind of stuff. But from he was young, I've been saying to him that it's okay for you to be able to do that, right? It's okay for you to express yourself. It's okay for you to cry. You know, I remembered even when I was a child and my father died, there were some of my uncles who kind of said to me, like, shh, you know, why are you crying? You shouldn't be crying in public. You know, you're a man. You're the man of the house now. Because I was the eldest son. You know, so those things have been kind of drilled in you. So, and maybe that's where a lot of this is coming from, where males are concerned. Should fathers receive the same amount of leave as mothers, like the same paternity leave, the same number of weeks paternity leaves as maternity leave? What is that too controversial, too revolutionary?
Oh, well, speaking from I'm not. I think it would be great to share the leave. I think that so I think it's for, you know, both parents to decide what's the best combination of leave, and then present that to their company or both companies and try and make that work. You know, obviously it's a difficult one because it just depends, because yes, in those early days, you know, the mother is very much, you know, kind of a key provider, but that can change quite quickly. And so I think it very much depends on the individual concerned and how they feel it's best to share that time. But I think, but my gut feel is that sharing that time out, however that couple feels fit, in discussion with their organisations, would be the best outcome. I don't know, Aidan, what your view is on that.
I think it depends on the relationship between mother and father. I think that's the most important aspect of it. It depends on the level of communication. It depends on financial stability of the family.
Absolutely.
It depends on the career aspirations of mum, and I think that's really important for working mums and husbands or partners of working mums, because both parents experience conflict because they're parents and having to balance work and family life. But I think, and I speak from experience of watching my wife go through a number of challenges over the last couple of years, and the conflict that she has to wrestle with, but also she has to battle with being a working mum. She's not just a woman that's working. She's now a working mum, and therefore there are things that she has to, obstacles that she has to overcome. And it's quite basic stuff as well, and frustratingly from a husband's perspective, you can see what it's doing to her. So my view on shared leave, or mum and dad having equal leave, or a dad having more leave, I think it all depends on the family unit, depends on how that relationship is built, and whether or not sometimes it will just boil down to finances, whether or not it works. You know, there are many mums out there that would prefer to go back to work but can't, because childcare is so excessively expensive. That's a barrier to them returning to work. So I think it starts with the unique unit in the family, and then the companies supporting and educating around the decision, because you're making, as a mum, you're taking it up to a year out in most instances, I'm sure. You don't know what support you're going to get when you get back. And in my own experience as a dad, you don't get many support when you get back. So it's understanding what pressure that's going to create on your family experience moving forward. And I would happily take a year off to spend with my two boys. It would be brilliant. But I know that I'm a patient guy, but I know that sometimes my wife is far better at stepping in and calming the situations down. And I've seen a couple of dads recently that are exclusively staying at home with their kids, and if there's no support from work and there's no support in your local community, it becomes really hard for them to make life-changing decisions, because it is a life-changing decision.
And I think without deviating away from our topic, which is parental leave for men, I think that you're right in terms of sometimes it's financials and it is careers, and a lot of women and men, if they're going to be the carers, have to make decisions around their career, because often they don't want to go back full time, or they can't take on kind of the higher powered roles that they should be taking on because they're capable of, because they don't want to work the hours or whatever. So there are a lot of challenges around that, Aidan. I completely get that.
I mean, Debs, you've been involved in the whole notion of executive search and headhunting. Are you finding that, especially that this is now becoming a big benefit in attracting those you talk about men, those men who are going for those C-suite roles? Are you finding that a lot of them are seeing the whole notion of paternity leave as a really good benefit in the packages to kind of attract them to a company?
I say it's one off. I wouldn't say it's a drive on it, but I think certainly flexible working and the ability to work with a company that recognizes you as an individual, and so will allow you to trust you, I think. In the sense that I'm going to take the afternoon off to go and see my daughter play football, and then I'll make up the time, or you tend to be working longer hours. I think working for that sort of organisation which recognise the values you bring, but will allow you flexibility to have, well, not any of us have a perfect work-life balance, but to try and achieve some better form of work-life balance, I think is definitely attractive to both male and female.
Aidan, I mean, do you think that that should become a big part of the benefit package for companies?
I think it should be visible. I think we should have all the facts when we're applying for roles. I think many jobs don't even display the salary. So, and I haven't yet seen a job role with enhanced paternity. I know they're increasing because the data suggests that it is, but I wouldn't say that I've seen, and I've looked for a job in the last 12 months. I wouldn't say that I've seen any enhanced paternity packages as a benefit advertised.
I mean, I've so we're talking about a lot of the examples we've been kind of talking about is UK based, but I'm also seeing a lot of changes in other countries. So for example, Jamaica, mainly the large financial institutions, and I guess they're probably kind of taking their cue from what they're seeing happening in places like the UK and America as well, are now changing and now have this as part of their policy, but and also they're not just only because countries like Jamaica are still very kind of archaic or colonial in the sense that marriage, so they would recognize husband and wife and not common law, or, that kind of a unmarried kind of relationship. But there are some banks who are now saying married and common law can get both paternity and maternity leave, which is really very good. Do you guys think that the regulation needs to change though? Do you think regulations will help to drive this? Because I still believe that 2 weeks is just ridiculous in terms of, like, you can't do anything in 2 weeks, really.
No, I think it was the first step the government was prepared to take, wasn't it? And I'm sure that over time, that will increase. I think back to kind of Aidan's point, I think it's a financial burden at the moment. We're in a very difficult situation as a country, as an economy, and there are massive pressures on it. So and then this is just a personal view. I have no idea what government are thinking, but I don't imagine we're going to see massive change on parental leave soon. I think it's simply way up, but I think that, back to Aidan's point, that companies can offer discretionary greater leave, and that will be attractive, I think, to individuals, to allow them that flexibility. And I think that I really genuinely think it helps in familiar life, both for parents and children, for the father to have a really big part, to play a big part in their children's lives. And I think that's, if you want cohesive units, if you want balanced children, if you want well-being, and you think about all the children, what they've been through the last few years during COVID, the importance of both sides of the family, however that's made up, to support that. It's just so important, I think. So I think whatever we can do to facilitate that, goes beyond just the kind of financial piece. But at the end of the day, I think that's where the government will sit.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the relationship I have with my kids would not have come about unless I was actually there from the very beginning, to just kind of, listen to them and being part of their lives. Like, my daughter, the first time she got her menstrual cycle, I'm the first person she called, not her mother, not my grandmother, not her grandmother, because of the relationship that we have, and I think that it's because from they were young, I was just there listening, helping to changing the nappies, doing the bath times, picking them up at school, playing with them, all of that. But I was lucky. A lot of don't have that. Don't have that kind of flexibility. So Aidan, some of the work you're now doing, tell us about some of the work you're doing with Revolution. You're talking about that pop-up poster behind you, New Dad Recharge. What's that all about?
So New Dad Recharge is essentially a simple course for new dads to follow. So it's got nothing to do with the practicalities of fatherhood. So I don't teach anyone how to change nappies, how to sterilized bottles. It is simply about
Aidan, back in my days, they were the wash nappies that you had to learn how to kind of spin, without sticking the child. Nowadays, it's just some
yeah,
plates that,
or pull them up.
Yeah, exactly. Or pull-ups. Yeah, it's much easier now. Much easier now.
No, but also it's around understanding your role or the role you want to play, understanding the pressures that you're going to face. There's a couple of exercises that we go through which simply help you clarify what's important to you. So when you're making your decisions, similar to me trying to make a decision about a job, going through a very simple process to say, actually, this is the right reason because it benefits A, B, and C. If I don't make this decision, it will cost me A, B, and C. And it's helping dads balance their time, which is phenomenally difficult, don't get me wrong. But it's, you're faced with sleepless nights. You want to be able to find space for you as an individual. Your identity shifts as a father, so we touch on that. We also touch on the seismic shift in the relationship and what's important to you as a couple, and how you taking time for yourself needs to be mirrored so that you're encouraging your partner to also take time for herself, so that she's A, getting some rest, but also B, building her confidence and starting to think about decisions that she's going to need to make as maternity leave comes to an end. And then in my local community, we do a dad walk, which is simply drop in, come and have a chat. And we go for, a mile to 2.5 mile walk around the local area. And that is something that we do every Thursday. But on top of that, I'm now doing what I call dad chats. So using a lot of this material that's in my course, helping dads in the local area on difficult topics. So if they've got, so I met a dad on Friday who was going through a very difficult time. And what we're trying to work through together is, have you come to the end of the relationship that you're in? If you have, how do you work through it so that you're not impacting your kids?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if your relationship with your partner does break down at some point, we need to be very clear and you need to be very clear as an individual on how you can still have a massive impact on their lives as a dad, and how you can make time and how they can see the right behaviors so that your relationship may end, but your relationship with your kids improves.
I think that's interesting in terms of, I think having children, especially in those areas, puts a massive strain on relationships, absolute huge strain. So it is thinking about, we're in a particular situation, and let's see if we can work our way through that. And I read a very interesting point from a parent practice just recently. It said it's not divorce that damages children, it's conflict that damages children. I thought that was a very well made point. And again, I don't want to go off the topic of parental leave, but it's about how you work through in the most, the best way you can to kind of, say, still be part of your children's life, but keep it in a very sort of calm way, and don't use the children in that piece. I don't want to go off topic here.
No, but Deb, I mean, one of the things that just kind of popped into my head right now, of coming out of this conversation, it's, and especially as someone who's a mother and a woman, obviously, like, what are some of the things that you think that that men need to understand or know that a mother needs, especially in the early stages of birth? So I know we're talking about the father, but I think a lot of it comes from the whole notion that new dads sometimes don't know how to support their partner during this, because there's still hormones behaving all kinds of all over the way, right?
I think that's the key, the key thing, is that when it's quite a traumatic experience giving birth. I think it's also traumatic for the father if they're there. Okay, so don't get me wrong, and then your hormones are all over the place, and you're tired, and you're trying to be all things to more people, so you're not your usual self. And I think that's why I think that the support of the father is really important, but to be a little bit patient, a little bit understanding, and to things like Aidan say, encourage them to rest, because you tend to want to carry on as normal, and you just can't, and back to your point, Rim, is that things have changed. It used to be that you'd have your child in your village, and you'd have all the support of your parents and that community around you. Whereas these days we all move away to work, and so it's a very different situation for us in terms of the support network. But still back to my earlier point, there's a much better support network for women than there's for men at this moment of time. But I think it's just kind of being there, and being kind of understanding and supporting. So taking the baby up for a walk, so so your partner can have a rest, for an hour or so, or doing the change or cooking dinner. And I know that's hard on the back of a long day at work when all you want to do is come home and rest. Because I think that my bottom line is you've both been working very hard all day. Okay, that's my bottom line. Being at home with a child is not easy, and so just to try and find the balance of that, I think is quite a key one.
Okay, that's very important. So just kind of just giving some space and time for them to kind of
supporting one another. You're in it together. You're in it together.
Yeah.
I think. What would you say, Aidan?
Yeah,
I think it's setting expectations. So being really clear and communicating clearly to one another. So me coming back from work, for example, and then expecting dinner to be ready. Come on.
Yeah.
In the modern world, that's not real. But a lot of people still have that expectation that, well, you've been at home all day, you should have done this, you should have done that. It's like, come on, it's a full-time job. And anyone I'm very blessed to work from home permanently, and I have been working from home since 2020. I've seen how hard it can be, and I've seen how hard it can be in the early days when both of my children struggled with breastfeeding to start with, and therefore it was the most exhausting and emotional experience I think my wife had been through. With the sleepless nights aside, she wanted to bond with the baby. So NHS weren't particularly supportive, so we had to take alternative measures to ensure that her bond was still there. And we're fortunate to be in that position to do things like that. But there will be many people that will have already immediately caused conflict. Yeah. And it's because the mother's almost lacking confidence in what she's desperate to achieve.
Yeah.
And the father has absolutely no understanding of it, can't comprehend it fully, and therefore expects things to just it'll be fine, just get on with it. It'll work itself out, when clearly in some circumstances these things don't. And it's that understand almost. I'm again very lucky. We've been together for a very long time. We know each other inside out, and we know when we need to communicate and when we don't. And it will either be subtle cues or not. And even if I've been at work all day, my responsibility as a father coming home is, right, my first thing is I'm going to take the kids off you for half an hour. And I'm going to be totally interacting with them, not for your own, not just to create you space, but I want to bond with the kids I haven't seen all day. And I've been on my phone all day, or on meetings or whatever. That's the first thing that goes away. Get rid of that. I just want to focus on, even now at 5 and 2, if I'm picking them up from school and nursery, it's let's just get home, sit around the table, eat some food, try and have a conversation to try and understand what's been going on between the two of them. So, in a way, protecting mum from the stress and the pressure that she's trying to balance as a career mum now.
Yeah.
The other side of that, just quickly add, is your children love to be with you at this age. Okay, there's nothing they like more than having time with you, and that's the other side of it. Of this discussion, I think.
Yeah. I mean, as we wrap up, though, I mean, one of the other things that kind of popped into my head is the whole notion of how do companies benefit from giving paternity leave though? And maybe that's the reason why they're not kind of warming to it, because they're not seeing the benefit of offering this.
Well, I think it's happy people at the end of the day. You want you want to retain talent. You want to keep them happy. I think by giving back to this sort of flexibility of work-life balance, by recognizing that and giving that to them, I think you do see the benefit of it. At the moment, I mean, some companies will really embrace it, and others will not, and that's just the nature of the beast. But I think that you will see the benefit, because you'll have a member of staff who is hopefully enjoying their role, enjoying their family life, feels there's a bit better balance there, and therefore will stay and be committed to you. So I think you will see the benefit in the way that we have from extending maternity leave. That yes, there are issues around how you balance when people are not there and the cost of that. But I think in the longer term, you'll see the financial return on the investment you've made in giving people that flexibility to have that work-life balance. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I think it's engagement. Like I say, it's engagement with a colleague, because ultimately we are going to work. We want to be happy. We want to be contributing and be felt valued.
Yeah.
By extending my paternity from statutory to paid for 2 weeks, it was only 2 weeks, I knew I was going to get 2 weeks with my kids. And therefore, when I got back, certainly the first time, when I got back, I was on it, ready for the next bit of time off with the kids. But I was more energized, because I knew that my company had given me a little bit of extra time to build. We had some wonderful times in that first 2 weeks with my first one. Second time, not so much, but certainly the first one. And I went back happier. I was more engaged. I was more focused. And those are the things that you need from a mum or a dad coming back from paternity or maternity.
Yeah. And what are some of the supports that, I mean, especially if they give you what you call the extended package, where they're actually paying you for the 2 weeks, your regular salary for the 2 weeks when you're off. But what are some of the, you also spoke about support going back. What are some of those support going back looks like?
So I think, so my wife had maternity coaching post second baby. I've never come into contact with a business that had done it. So she was, up until the point she got back to work, they'd done it very well. But she was supported so she had inset or touch days, touch days. Right. But then they spent 3, 4, 5 sessions, I think, with her saying, look, these are the things to expect. These are the challenges as a mum you're going to need to expect. And whilst I don't necessarily, at the moment, there's no real stigma attached to dads taking paternity leave, partly because not everyone's taking it. But a dad wants to feel like he's supported in that same way. So even just a welcome back to work, how was it? Because in that 2 weeks, your entire world could have been turned upside down. Your partner could have gone through an extremely traumatic birth. You would have made, I met a dad recently, and he'd made decisions that he hadn't even understood what they were doing to him. And then 2 weeks later, he went back to work. And then a couple of months later, he started to feel like he was, mentally exhausted. Yeah. So it's making sure that dads have got a return to work meeting. B, if it's a company or organization big enough, they've got enough education around paternity leave and the impacts on family. Yeah, specifically around financial planning, and very specifically around the cost of childcare. Yeah, these are all the things that dads and mums need support with in those early days.
But what about also, I'm just thinking about educating line managers to understand that if, or the culture of the organization, if a man says, you know what, I need to leave early today because, I need to go home and pick the kids up, or my wife isn't feeling well because she just had a baby, then that should be okay. right? And it shouldn't be they shouldn't be kind of looked down on if they want to do that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think so. Great. I mean, Debs, anything else from you? I think this was a great
Yeah,
discussion. I don't know if you
the
have any.
only thing I was going to, just on the back of Aidan's last point, actually, was I wonder whether in terms of that sort of educational piece, whether that's useful before you go on parental leave to say, that planning,
Good point.
this is what to expect when you're on paternity leave, and obviously then coming back. So whether there's something that maybe is engaging before that all happens, rather than when you come back and you're already kind of in the midst of it,
True. Aidan, there is a business revenue stream for
Yes.
you. Yes. Yeah, because you're so right. I mean, if before they go off, if
Yeah.
they were able to kind of get some coaching to say, this is what to expect as a new dad, this is the support that you need to give, and then on the way back is kind of giving them another kind of piece. I think that would be amazing.
You kind of feel that it's still the same as it was. So you have 2 weeks leave and it's like, oh, that's great, but it's still that kind of, it doesn't really affect men. It's all about the female. It's all about the mother. And there is, to some extent, okay, there is an element of that man can carry on with his job, do the long hours, and his wife or partner will be him doing that. So there is a little bit of that, but I don't think that's how a lot of partners want it to be. I think that they want to contribute and be part of it. So I think I know as a female, before I went, to give birth, it was great to have, some idea of what to expect, and kind of this will happen, and you may feel this way. And so if you do, you're not going mad. It's just all those. So that kind of educational piece is actually quite useful, And I think that possibly, therefore, yes, is a piece that we could pick up. And Aidan, it'd be great to share all your details so we can, share them actually to other men, who might be interested either going down that path in the future or, or in it now. And it'd be great to know they have some support out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about us at Lumos. We just come up with these revolutionary, transformational ideas and ways of doing stuff. Way to go. That's what we do here. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we will share your details if that's okay with you, Aidan, because I think, and for those of you who are listening, if you check the comments, those links will be there, because I think what you offer is amazing, especially for new dads now, who don't have, or new families now who don't necessarily have the support mechanism, as Deb said, the village that would have kind of helped you, the old aunt and the grandparents and all of that, who themselves are pretty young these days, because you know what I mean. So yeah, it would be great to kind of offer that support as well. Brilliant. Debs, any summary points? What are some of the, what's some of your key points that you figured you kind of took away from this discussion?
Well,
anything jumped out?
Well, I think, it's been an education for me in some ways, in terms of understanding, the father's position and some of the issues that Aidan has raised. I think that's been really, really wonderful. So thank you, Aidan, for that. And I think it's how do we, educate our organisations? How do we educate, all kind of people who are involved in this piece to stretch it out, whether that's government pieces, whether it's the companies themselves, whether it's the individuals. It's how do we now move things forward to get a better balance, for the kind of male lead in parental care.
Yeah. I mean, for me, some of the points that jumped out was the whole notion of that support piece. Like, I am definitely going to be because my network is wide, and I sometimes come across new and young dads, and my thing for them would be, make sure you kind of, and they always seem to be asking me how has it been like a dad. But I think that I have been guilty of saying to them, oh, don't worry, it will become so much easier, because my era of a dad was completely different, right? I had mom, grandmother, aunties, sisters, everyone to support me. So I think I got away quite easy. But yeah, it's going to be, you need to seek help. You need to get some advice. You need to get some support, some peer support, that kind of stuff. So that's one of the things that jumped out at me. And also the whole notion that I think companies should make this part of their benefit package. and make it because it's just 2 weeks, man. Like it's not going to break the bank to continue paying a real, an employee for 2 weeks while they're on paternity leave. Like you're not taking a substitute in like you do for maternity leave most of the time. So yeah, so it's not really impacting the P&L that much. So just do it. You'd have give the father one less thing to worry about when they're on paternity leave. They don't have to worry about do I need to stop buying baby formula for argument's sake because I'm not getting paid. So those are some of the things that jumped out. Aidan, thank you so much for sharing with us. We'll definitely share your links in the comment section below. Debs, once again, brilliant co-hosting. I know we had some technical difficulties.
Issues. Sorry about that.
Yes. But we made it anyway. Folks, that's all we have for this episode of the Leadership Melting Pot. Today we focused on a conversation around paternity leave, which was really, really remarkable and really learned a lot. Until next time, on the Leadership Melting Pot, thank you very much for tuning in. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Medium at Lumerous PLC. Please follow, subscribe, and share this episode and all the other episodes. You can find this podcast on all podcast platforms, iPodcast, Google Podcasts, etc. And I'd also just like to, once again give a big acknowledgement to the Lumerous team behind the scenes, George, Candice, Ralph, and all the others for once again making this an amazing topic, an amazing podcast. Thank you, Aidan. Thank you, Debs. And see you guys. See you again. Debs, see you next week.
See you next week.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Yes.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us. You can also reach us and find out more about us via our website, lumerous.com.